What's going on, everyone? Gareth here, FCP Euro. Welcome back to another DIY video. We have a pretty straightforward one for you today. We're going to be replacing a battery on an E92 M3 that's on the lift behind me. So while we are replacing the battery on an E92 M3, this same process is going to be the same for any E90, E91, E92, E93, or an E82 E88 1 series. So 1 series, 3 series from that 2006 to 2013 time period. This is pretty much just going to be the same process. And generally, we can consider this the same process on most BMWs. Since batteries are typically located in the trunk, you could generally follow this DIY for really any BMW replacing a battery on. But why replacing the battery? In this vehicle's case, this is preventative maintenance. This actually still has the original battery in it from September of 2010. So over 13 years of age at the point of this filming. Car's 50,000 miles on it. Realistically, the battery is still in good shape. Car runs fine. There's no electrical faults. But there is a point in time where we've definitely got our service life out of the battery. It's time to replace it. We're going to be using an Odyssey Performance AGM battery. The factory battery is an AGM. But with that said, more times than not, I would say that batteries are being replaced because the battery is no longer in good condition. The car won't start. It really is a better idea to replace the battery before that problem comes. And particularly in colder parts of the country or colder parts of the world, you really want to look at the performance of the battery, the capacity, especially when you're going into a colder part of the year, so heading into winter, and replace the battery if you're going to be driving the vehicle during that time of year to make sure you don't get stuck somewhere, because that's no fun. So with that said, let's talk about some of the tools we're going to need to do this job, and then we'll go ahead and jump right into doing it. All right, so for battery replacement, it's pretty straightforward. We're only going to need a handful of tools. We need a 10mm socket, 13mm socket, 1/4 inch drive in this case, 1/4 inch ratchet, a long extension for the battery hold down, a flathead screwdriver for releasing the battery distribution box, a magnetic pickup tool, a little tiny pry bar. In addition, a couple of other tools that you might want, a battery terminal brush, one of these style that both have the external and internal brush. Definitely a work light. It's pretty dark in the trunk, so being able to light up your work area is going to be useful. And at least on this car, you will need to do a battery registration, so having a scan tool that's capable of a battery registration is going to be a requirement. In this case, we have the Autel MX808 on hand, which is a really good scan tool that has a bunch of factory level service functions that you will need when you do these types of services on a modern car. So that's all you really need to do this job. And with that said, let's go ahead and get right into it. Like I said earlier, a lot of BMW batteries are in the trunks on the car, on all these cars. Usually gonna be on the right-hand side. Some cars will have it in the middle. In the case of the M3 or any of your E90s and your E8X 1 series cars, so they'll be behind this little compartment cover here. So you have a knob that we just kind of turn to the side, and then that gives us access to our battery right here. Now, we did talk about how to identify the battery size and everything like that. We're going to show you that this matches up to the new Odyssey battery. Now, in the case of this vehicle, we have a couple of things, like we have a C-Tech charger plug already pre-installed in the car, since this car does get parked for prolonged periods of time, so maintain the battery. And then we also have a C-Tech battery monitor, so there's a couple of different connections that this has that yours may not. But that actually doesn't really hinder us from doing anything else, since it's all still pretty much the same work. So, with that said, we have to remove this little cross brace here first. It's held in by two 10mm screws, so pretty straightforward. So a couple things are just sort of zip tied to our little cross brace here, so you're not going to have that on a stock vehicle or a vehicle that doesn't have this additional accessories attached to it, so you just need to cut those zip ties real quick. Now, this kind of gives us a little bit more exposure to the top of the battery. What we're going to do next is disconnect the ground from the battery. So that's going to be another 10mm nut. Once the ground is removed, we'll be safe to move on to the positive battery connection. And once the ground is removed, the light in the trunk will go off for obvious reasons. Now, on the case of the E90s and your E81 series, there's still a decent amount of stuff in the way because we have our positive battery cable that comes over the top. We have another positive battery cable here. So we kind of have to shift stuff out of the way to get the battery out. But from here, we can move on to the connections for our distribution block right here. So we have a distribution block that sits atop the positive battery terminal connection. And then on top of it, you know, on your ground side, you do have another electrical connection that comes over here. And this would be your, this is basically in the situation of if you have an airbag deployment, this will cut the ground to the battery. So just be aware of this connection. You don't want to twist it or mangle it. Just be careful with it. And from here, we have a couple different connections here for this distribution block. I've seen it done two ways. You can either unbolt the distribution block and move it off to the side, or you can leave it attached to the positive battery terminal. That kind of has its own sort of problems because you have this pretty big battery connection here, and then you have the cable that runs to the front of the car. These tend to interfere with each other, but you can kind of go either way with it. You can undo these connections if you really want to, if you want the extra space, but it is possible to get the battery out without having to do that. And also, whatever you do, make sure your ground cable is like tucked behind the battery so it doesn't have any chance to come in contact with the ground. For some, you know, battery cables have a tendency to always go back to where they've been installed forever, so you kind of have to force them out of the way. So next up, we're going to take these 13mm nuts off for the power distribution block. So there's one here, and there's another one over here. Now, you might be able to do this where you can kind of get this entire thing out of the way without having to remove these, but I think it's just easier to take these connections off and remove the box entirely out of the way. And we can also remove these plugs here for these additional wires. These are actually pretty simple. You just press down on the release and then it slides out. Now after that's done, we'll show you on camera. There's release tabs here on the side of the distribution block. Once those are undone, you can basically lift the entire thing off. It's just a matter of basically unclipping it from the battery, basically. So you have this little metal clip on the side of the power distribution block, flathead screwdriver, pry it to the side. Come on. And it loosens up just like that. So caution to the wise here. I'm now wearing gloves. Be very, very careful with the edge of this little spring. It is sharp, very sharp, and you will cut yourself. Yeah, so this spring right here, this clip, ridiculously sharp. Be careful. You might cut yourself like I just did. And after this, we have our positive battery cable right there, which there's a little 10mm nut that secures the terminal to the top of the battery. We'll just twist it off because at this point there's nothing holding it on. All right, and we can kind of do this. We can push it forward and out of the way like that. So right here towards the back is the battery hold down. It's a 10mm screw, and you're going to need a long extension to gain access to it. It's all 1/4-inch drive stuff. There's your little hold down there. BMW was very gracious, put a little O-ring on the screw to keep it together. Somebody in engineering was thinking of the next guy. And so at this point, we can go ahead and pull the battery out. Now there is a vent tube on this side, which we want to pull off. So that just basically comes out of the side. You can see that right there. Just pull it out. So the factory batteries are going to have a vent tube. The Odyssey AGM, even though this is an AGM, the way that the Odyssey batteries are made, we don't need to use the vent. So there's no worries on that. And then from here, the goal is going to be to pull the battery up straight as possible. It is heavy, so make sure you give yourself some space. And it goes out saying now is a really great time to take a vacuum, and if there's any debris down there, clean it out. So on the factory battery right here, the date code is stamped on the ground terminal. That's another place to look for it. And they'll do it, it's a 4-digit code, so it'll be a week and then year. So in this case, this battery was produced in the 29th week of 2010, and this car is a September 2010 production. So 29th week is July-ish. So yeah, 29th week would be July, somewhere around July. This car is produced in September, so this is the original battery. And the way that we determine the battery size from this is we do have a part number on it. You can look up the part number, and that's going to go over to a H8 or a Group 49 battery. H8 is going to be your metric sizing, so H8, H6. Group 49, I guess, is your standard sizing, but they're both kind of the same. We're gonna grab the Odyssey battery, put them side by side, and we'll show you basically that is the same size. H8, H8, same size battery. So with that said, Odyssey does give us a installation date stamp that we could do on here, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. It is my car, so I'm gonna remember when this was done, but you know, in the interest of keeping things consistent. Also, Odyssey, they do provide you the vent hole, so you can attach a vent to it if you need to. I will use the vent anyway, even though the battery is sealed and is not vented. So before we install the new battery, I'm gonna go ahead and just take this battery terminal brush. This is from CTA, offered on the website. I'm gonna go ahead and just clean these terminals off. Now, it's a new battery, so you know, I would say, yeah, they're clean, but this kind of just ensures that we get really good, slap it down there. This just ensures that we get a really good connection, you know, and also like if you had a battery in, like, let's say the engine bay, corrosion would be probably a little bit more of a common problem. So you'd want to have this be like a common maintenance tool that you have on hand. And this is the other end of the battery brush. So just kind of come in here, clean out the insides. Because even though the battery's in the trunk here and corrosion is probably not the most likely scenario, this just ensures that we get really good metal to metal contact and we get the most performance out of the battery that we possibly can. Just something good to do before, you know, you put a new battery in. And then, like I said, if you have a vehicle with a battery and engine bay, that's probably something you should do like once a year. Clean and then coat the terminals to make sure that they don't corrode. So we'll get a really good electrical connection here. So at this point, we're gonna go ahead and physically just throw the battery right in there. We're just gonna yeet it in. It's gonna be fine. So getting the new battery in is a little bit of a balancing act of keeping everything out of the way and not getting anything stuck under the battery. Positive side is here. So the battery's gonna go in this way. They can only go in one way, but it would be really unfortunate to drop the battery down and find that the terminals are on the wrong side. So terminals are gonna face inward that way. So another little change, or what I like to call an update we're gonna do, is this little hold down screw is impossible to put back in if you have the hands of an adult, basically. Even if you have the hands of a small child, I don't think you're gonna have a good time lining it up. This hold down screw is very difficult to get to. It is very difficult to line up. We do need to reuse the hold down because this hold down perfectly engages with the battery like that. However, I'm gonna take a different battery hold down screw from BMW's collection of parts. This is a nice long screw. We're gonna take that hold down off. We're going to put this O-ring up on the top because that's the way they had it. Like so, little rubber insulator. We'll put this little retainer back on. And now, when we're gonna put the battery in, we'll be able to actually like bring this and bring it down back and be able to thread it in and get it started with our hands from up top as opposed to forcing it. Funny enough, the 1 Series uses a longer hold down screw, whereas the E90s use that really short hold down screw. I'm sure on the 1 Series space is even tighter, but there's no reason we should make this any more difficult than it needs to be. Quite frankly, getting the battery back in is challenging enough, trying to keep everything out of the way and not getting anything stuck under the battery, so why worry about the hold down screw? So we're gonna tuck everything out of the way towards the back of the trunk, give ourselves the most amount of room humanly possible in a very tight, narrow space. Positive terminal towards the front, ground towards the rear, battery terminals face inboard like that. If you were to put it in the other way, it's not gonna fit. So modification successful. Way easier, much better than the factory hold down screw. And it is going to be angled because the base, or the way that it goes in, it is angled. So if you see that the longer screw is sideways towards the rear of the trunk, that's fine. That's the way it should be. But battery is now secured and we can start reattaching. We'll do the positive battery cable first, so we'll go ahead and put that back on. I'm gonna make sure the ground is still clear out of the way. Remove this screw entirely because we need to put some of the C-Tech stuff back on afterwards. Or I'm sorry, nut for the positive battery terminal. It's for the little T-nut that tightens down the clamp. So we're gonna leave that like that for now. And we will reattach our power distribution block. Push those little retainers down, you heard them click. The M8 nuts are 15 newton meters of torque, and then the M6s are 10 newton meters if you want to use a torque wrench on these terminals. 1/4 inch tools. This stuff doesn't have to be tight. Well, it has to be tight. It doesn't have to be too tight. You know, so if you don't trust your calibrated wrist, use a torque wrench. But I would say on a situation like this, if you installed batteries before, you know, something like that, choked up, when the nut stops, you're done. There's no need to go further. Once you start breaking stuff, it gets expensive, so don't want to do that. Now, one thing I think you've probably figured out on the E90, well, this is really any modern car, a lot of stuff connected to the battery. It's not a matter of 2 simple cables or 3. There's a lot of things that are intertwined with each other. These are all pretty critical connections. So it is important to make sure that when you put it back together, it goes back together kind of the way that it came apart. So we have this other battery cable here. That's gonna be the other 13 millimeter nut. And then we have these simple click-in connections that we need to do. The blue one goes to the section labeled blue. So that clicks in like so. We are in a position where we can throw our battery ground back on. Now, the battery ground, this has the battery safety terminal. So this is what severs the battery connection in the event of an airbag deployment. Put the battery ground back on, light turns on, which of course is good. Now there's additional lighting in the trunk so we can see better. Go ahead and tighten this ground down because we're not going to have to touch that again. Again, common sense, doesn't have to be ridiculously tight, just tight so it doesn't become loose because of vibrations. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten this 10 millimeter nut back down for the positive battery terminal. So yeah, at this point we have the positive battery terminal tightened down. We have the ground terminal tightened down. By the way, correction, the battery safety terminal is positive and then the intelligent battery sensor is ground. I had those reversed earlier. That had a little bit of a brain fart, so that was on me. At this point, we're just gonna put this secondary hold down. I guess this would technically prevent the battery from yeeting forward if somehow the main hold down was not in position. And then right here, we just have these two 10 millimeter screws. So now that the battery is installed, we need to do something called a battery registration. And what that is we're resetting the learning parameters of the car's charging system so that it knows that a new battery is installed. It's sort of the same concept of like batteries have memories. That is a thing where a battery, if the battery is always discharged, that no matter how much you charge it, it's always going to be at that level. So the whole point in this system is to maintain the battery life as long as possible, charge the battery as much as it needs to be and no more, and prolong the life of the battery and reduce the parasitic draw on the charging system by always keeping that battery at the correct level that it needs to be. And you just have to inform the car that you did the change, which we need to do with the scan tool. That's easy enough. We're gonna be using the Autel MX808, which it has that battery registration as a native function on it. Most scan tools now have that feature because this is a very common procedure that needs to be done on BMWs, and there's other manufacturers that do it as well. So we'll show you that process. So we're gonna go to on our MX808, which we've done a bunch of special service features with before. We've seen a bunch of videos. It's a really good scan tool for the money. We're gonna plop into service, and then under service, we're gonna go to BMS, which we'll just say that's battery monitoring system. In the case of BMW, BMW calls it IBS. We're all gonna have a full blog article about what IBS does and the nature of it, just to have linked in this video that goes into a little bit more depth. But really, like I said before, the entire point of the system is to optimally charge a battery and get the most service life out of it and reduce as much parasitic drag on the engine as possible by duty cycling the battery and the charging system and everything like that. So this is going to take a moment for the system data to load, which is fine. All right, so from here we're going to go to hot functions, and this is going to show you your options. So part of the IBS is power management, so you can actually look at the battery itself. So you can actually use some of the information there to do a diagnostic on whether or not you maybe have a charging problem or a battery issue. There is quite a bit of information that is stored there. You have a power down command, register battery exchange, and then charging the battery via the diagnostic socket. Not going to worry about any of that. We're going to register the battery exchange because that is what we have done. And this is where you're going to see your choices. There's going to be 3. What do you want to do? Display battery exchange history, register the battery replacement. So there's only 2 there. The 3 options on register the battery replacement. You're going to see enter the battery exchange, same capacity. Enter the battery exchange, higher/lower capacity. Enter the battery exchange, change the normal lead acid battery to absorbent glass matte battery. In this case, there was an AGM battery that came out. We're putting an AGM battery back in, so there's no need to worry about any of that. AGM is charged differently than lead acid, so you know that duty cycling that has to happen. The car can adapt to that based on whether it knows what battery's in or not. So we're going from AGM to AGM, so we don't need to worry about that. We're just going to basically choose F1 because the battery has the same capacity. And then it's going to ask, is this newly installed battery an original component? That's asking, is it a genuine BMW battery? Which in this case, it is not. So we're simply going to say no. And right now, we have successfully registered a new battery at 81,050 kilometers, and this stores up to 4 battery exchanges. So the original battery was in the car for the factory, so the only exchange that we have is the one that we just did. So we're good on that front. And now in the next step, the time of the vehicle will be set because after all of this, so it's going to do the date, the time, hit continue. And now the time has been set and the date has been set in the car, which is also a really nice part right there. And then if we wanted to go to power management and just look at the state of the battery, we could do that. So it says charge status of the last 5 days are stored, which we're not going to have because the battery's literally just been installed. But you know, it'll give you a graph. So it can show you like between what percentages it's been stored at. There is no history because it's a brand new battery, but it'll show you how many hours is at 20% or 20 to 40 or 40 to 60. So there's a lot of information that could be had through that. So this is a really good diagnostic tool that's built into the car, which you're only going to have access in here. So like 1 day ago, this is probably on the old battery, 73.05%. So there is a lot of information that can be had from the system, and it could be a really good diagnostic tool as well. So a lot of people complain that, you know, this is like an extraneous feature, but the reality is it's both a diagnostic tool, it's a tool for efficiency, it's a tool for maximizing battery life, and you know, it's just the way that modern cars are. So, but with the proper tool, it's very easy to do. And the most important thing here, we'll just make sure the car still starts, you know. It does. You know, replacing the battery is a mostly straightforward process. I'd say the only challenging part realistically is the amount of space that you have to work with in the trunk of this car. Of course, on any given BMW, that could be different based on where the battery's installed, whether it's in the middle of the trunk, whether it's in the well off to the right. In this case, you know, we did make that change with the battery hold down screw, which I think is a requirement for this car. There's just no way anybody with hands like normal sized hands is going to be able to put that little screw back in place. So we'll provide a part number for that screw that we chose to put in, that other hold down screw, but that's just an easy update that you can do. It's also going to make your life easier later on if you ever go to replace the battery, or if you don't have the car, you're paying it forward for the next person. That's good juju. We want that in our life. So with that said, super easy process. MX808 makes the battery registration super easy to do. Like I said, we'll have a link to a blog that explains the entire intelligent battery monitoring system, so you can learn more about it in detail and why it's important and why it is important to do a battery registration. So I hope you learned a lot in this video. If you have any questions or comments, drop in the comment box below. If you like this video, hit like, and of course hit subscribe. There's a lot of videos on the way and you'll want to stay tuned for those, but at this point, we'll see you for the next one. Thanks for watching.